Huwato found several competing local powers in the south, including Isan-Lersa, Eshnunna and later Babylonia. The last of these eventually came to briefly dominate the south of Mesopotamia as the Babylonian Empire, just as the old Assyrian Empire had already done in the north from the late 21st century BC. The Sumerian language continued as a sacerdotal language taught in schools in Babylonia and Assyria, much as Latin was used in the medieval period, for as long as cuneiform was used. Fall and transmission. This period is generally taken to coincide with a major shift in population from southern Mesopotamia toward the north. Ecologically, the agricultural productivity of the Sumerian lands was being compromised as a result of rising salinity. Soil salinity in this region had been long recognized as a major problem. 53. Dry-drained irrigated soils, in an arid climate with high levels of evaporation, led to the buildup of dissolved salts in the soil, eventually reducing agricultural yields severely. 54. During the Akkadian and Ural three phases, there was a shift from the cultivation of wheat to the more salt-tolerant barley, but this was insufficient, and during the period from 2100 BC to 1700 BC, it is estimated that population in this area declined by nearly 3/5. 54. This greatly upset the balance of power within the region, weakening the areas where Sumerian was spoken, and comparatively strengthening those where Akkadian was the major language. Henceforth, Sumerian remained only a literary and liturgical language, similar to the position occupied by Latin in medieval Europe. Following an Elamite invasion and sack of Ur during the rule of Ibisin, c. 2028-2004 BC, Sumer came under Amorite rule, taken to introduce the Middle Bronze Age. The independent Amorite states of the 20th to 18th centuries are summarized as the dynasty of Isin in the Sumerian king list, ending with the rise of Babylonia under Hammurabi c. 1800 BC. Later rulers who dominated Assyria and Babylonia occasionally assumed the old Sargonic title King of Sumer and Akkad, such as Tukulti-Ninurta I of Assyria after c. 1225 BC. Population. Uruk, one of Sumer's largest cities, has been estimated to have had a population of 50,000-80,000 at its shoot winking side smiley 55. Given the other cities in Sumer, and the large agricultural population, a rough estimate for Sumer's population might be 0.8 million to 1.5 million. The world population at this time has been estimated at 27 million. 56. The Sumerians spoke a language isolate, but a number of linguists have claimed to be able to detect a substrate language of unknown classification beneath Sumerian because names of some of Sumer's major cities are not Sumerian, revealing influences of earlier inhabitants. 57. However, the archaeological record shows clear uninterrupted cultural continuity from the time of the early Ubaid period, 5300-4700 BC c. 14, settlements in southern Mesopotamia. The Sumerian people who settled here farmed the lands in this region that were made fertile by silt deposited by the Tigris and the Euphrates. Some archaeologists have speculated that the original speakers of ancient Sumerian may have been farmers who moved down from the north of Mesopotamia after perfecting irrigation agriculture there. The Ubaid period pottery of southern Mesopotamia has been connected via Chogamami transitional wear to the pottery of the Samara period culture, c. 5700-4900 BC c. 14, in the north, who were the first to practice a primitive form of irrigation agriculture along the middle Tigris River and its tributaries. The connection is most clearly seen at Tel El-Ulay near Lersa, excavated by the French in the 1980s, where 8 levels yielded pre-Ubaid pottery resembling Samarran ware. According to this theory, Farming peoples spread on into southern Mesopotamia because they had developed a temple-centered social organization for mobilizing labor and technology for water control, enabling them to survive and prosper in a difficult environment. Others have suggested a continuity of Sumerians from the indigenous hunter-fisher folk traditions associated with the bifacial assemblages found on the Arabian littoral. Joris Zarins believes the Sumerians may have been the people living in the Persian Gulf region before it flooded at the end of the last ice age. Culture, social and family life. In the early Sumerian period, the primitive pictograms suggest, 58, that pottery was very plentiful, and the forms of the vases, bowls and dishes were manifold. There were special jars for honey, butter, oil and wine, which was probably made from dates. Some of the vases had pointed feet, and stood on stands with crossed legs, others were flat-bottomed, and were set on square or rectangular frames of wood. The oil jars, and probably others also, were sealed with clay, precisely as in early Egypt. Vases and dishes of stone were made in imitation of those of clay. A feathered headdress was worn. Beds, stools and chairs were used, with carved legs resembling those of an ox. There were fireplaces and fire altars. Knives, drills, wedges and an instrument that looks like a saw were all known. While spears, bows, arrows, and daggers, but not swords, were employed in war. Tablets were used for writing purposes. Daggers with metal blades and wooden handles were worn, and copper was hammered into plates, while necklaces or collars were made of. A reconstruction in the British Museum of headgear and necklaces worn by women at the Royal Cemetery at Ur. Gold. Time was reckoned in lunar months. There is considerable evidence concerning Sumerian music. Lyres and flutes were replayed, among the best-known examples being the lyres of Ur. 59. Sumerian culture was male-dominated and stratified. The Code of Ur-Nammu, the oldest such codification yet discovered, dating to the Ur III, reveals a glimpse of societal structure in late Sumerian law. Beneath the Lugal, great man or king, all members of society belonged to one of two basic strata, the Lum or free person, and the slave, male, arid, female gem. The son of a Lum was called a Dumunita until he married. A woman, Munis, went from being a daughter, Dumuni, to a wife, Dam. Then if she outlived her husband, a widow, Numasu, and she could then remarry another man who was from the same tribe. In early Sumer, women played an important public role as priestesses. They could also own property, transact business and had their rights protected by the courts. Sons and daughters inherited property on equal terms. The status of women deteriorated in the centuries after 2300 BC. Their right to dispose of their property was limited, and the female deities also lost their former importance. 61. Inscriptions describing the reforms of Kilarukijina of Lagash, c. 2350 BC, say that he abolished the former custom of polyandry in his country, prescribing that a woman who took multiple husbands be stoned with rocks upon which her crime had been written. 62. Sumerian princess, c. 2150 BC, Sumerian princess of the time of Gudiak. 2150 BC. Frontal detail. Louvre Museum A0295. Marriages were usually arranged by the parents of the bride and groom. Winking sad smiley. 63. 78. Engagements were usually completed through the approval of contracts recorded on clay tablets. 63. 78 BC. Marriages became legal as soon as the groom delivered a bridal gift to his bride's father. 63. 78. One Sumerian proverb describes the ideal happy marriage through the mouth of a husband who boasts that his wife has borne him 8 sons and is still eager to have sex. 64. The Sumerians generally seem to have discouraged premarital sex. 65. Neither Sumerian nor Akkadian had a word exactly corresponding to the English word virginity, and the concept was expressed descriptively. For example, as a /enugi for a, some, /nanak bat, arc dot. Deflowered, or Ginans were, never having known a penis. 66. 91-93. It is unclear whether terms such as tattoo in Akkadian medical texts indicate the hymen, but it appears that the intactness of the hymen was much less relevant to assessing a woman's virginity than in later cultures of the Near East, and most assessments of virginity depended on the woman's own account. 66. 91-92. From the earliest records, the Sumerians had very relaxed attitudes towards sex. 67. And their sexual mores were determined not by whether a sexual act was deemed immoral, but rather by whether or not it made a person ritually unclean. 67. The Sumerians widely believed that masturbation enhanced sexual potency, both for men and for women. 67. And they frequently engaged in it, both alone and with their partners. 67. The Sumerians did not regard anal sex as taboo either. 67. N2 priestesses were forbidden from producing offspring. 68. 64. And frequently engaged in anal sex as a method of birth control. 68. 67. 64. Prostitution existed, but it is not clear if sacred prostitution did. 69. 151. Language and writing. Tablet with pictographic pre-cuneiform writing, late 4th millennium BC, limestone, height 4.5 centimeters, width 4.3 centimeter, depth 2.4 centimeters, new. The standard reconstruction of the development of writing. Egyptian hieroglyphics and Sumerian cuneiform are both considered to derive from pictographs. 70. 71. The most important archaeological discoveries in Sumer are a larger number of clay tablets written in cuneiform script. Sumerian writing is considered to be a great milestone in the development of humanity's ability to not only create historical records but also in creating pieces of literature, both in the form of poetic epics and histories as well as prayers and laws. Although the writing system was first hieroglyphic using ideograms, logosyllabic cuneiform soon followed. Triangular or wedge-shaped reeds were used to write on moist clay. A large body of hundreds of thousands of texts in the Sumerian language have survived, including personal and business letters, receipts, lexical lists, laws, hymns, prayers, stories, and deirecords. Full libraries of clay tablets have been found. Monumental inscriptions and texts on different objects, like statues or bricks, aerials are very common. Many texts survive in multiple copies because they were repeatedly transcribed by scribes in training. Sumerian continued to be the language of religion and law in Mesopotamia long after Semitic speakers had become dominant. A prime example of cuneiform writing would be a lengthy poem that was discovered in the ruins of Uruk. The Epic of Gilgamesh was written in the standard Sumerian cuneiform. It tells of a king from the early dynastic II period named Gilgamesh or Bilgamesh in Sumerian. The story relates the fictional adventures of Gilgamesh and his companion, Enkidu. It was laid out on several clay tablets and is thought to be the earliest known surviving example of fictional literature. The Sumerian language is generally regarded as a language isolate in linguistics because it belongs to non-known language family. Akkadian, by contrast, belongs to the Semitic branch of the Afroasiatic languages. There have been many failed attempts to connect Sumerian to other language families. It is an agglutinated language, in other words, morphemes, units of meaning, are added together to create words, unlike analytic languages where morphemes are purely added together to create sentences. Some authors have proposed that there may be evidence of a substratum or adstratum language for geographic features and various crafts and agricultural activities, called variously Proto-Euphratian or Proto-Tigrian, but this is disputed by others. Understanding Sumerian texts today can be problematic. Most difficult are the earliest texts, which in many cases do not give the full grammatical structure of the language and seem to have been used as an aide-memoire for knowledgeable scribes. 72. Akkadian gradually replaced Sumerian as a spoken language somewhere around the turn of the 3rd and the 2 ND millennium BC, 73, but Sumerian continued to be used as a sacred, ceremonial, literary, and scientific language.